welcome to Coast Talks for March 2024. My name is Jason Goldsworthy. I'm the Executive Director of Coast and your host and moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to just acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, today known as the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations. Before we get into our topic today, I'd like to just share a little bit about Coast. Coast is the Centre for Ocean Applied and Sustainable Technologies. It is an initiative of the South Island Prosperity Partnership, and we exist to help industry find new commercial solutions to key challenges facing our oceans, support startups and new ventures commercialise innovation in the blue economy, engage Indigenous leadership in ocean innovation, and attract talent, capital and partnerships to grow businesses in BC. On today's topic, for Coast Talks, we are diving into the forefront of aquaculture innovation. As the demand for sustainable food sources intensifies, the evolution of aquaculture becomes paramount in ensuring global food security. Today's webinar aims to navigate this dynamic landscape, shedding light on pioneering technologies and practices poised to revolutionise the industry. On the panel today, we welcome three industry experts who will examine how these innovations address pressing issues such as overfishing, habitat degradation, and the delicate balance between economic growth and environmental stewardship. I'm very excited to welcome our three panelists: Dean Trethewey, Managing Director of Aquaculture; Jamie Gaskell, CEO of Poseidon Ocean Systems; and Isaiah Robinson, Deputy Chief Counsellor of the Kitasoo Hayhace Nation and Manager of Kitasoo Development Corporation. Each panelist will provide us with a short summary of their current work, and then we'll move into a moderated Q&A sessions. I'm looking forward to getting some questions from the audience to help me through my moderation, but please leave them for the end of the three panelist sessions, and we'll have a good half hour to talk about, to pose those questions around. First up today, I'd like to welcome Dean Trethewey, who is the Managing Director of Aquaculture Salmon, which specialises in closed containment salmon production. With over 30 years of experience in ocean-related work, Dean brings a wealth of knowledge and a strong passion for sustainable aquaculture. Currently based on Vancouver Island, Dean holds a master's degree in project management and is passionate to the health of our oceans and the sustainable aqua opportunities they offer Canadians and Indigenous people in coastal communities. Welcome, Dean.
Great, thanks, Jason. Thanks for inviting me to be here today. I'm going to start with a slide deck here. And how's that?
Perfect.
All right, great. So, as you mentioned, the Managing Director for Aquaculture. We're a company that's based in Norway. You draw a line right through their country there, and we're right pretty much smack in the middle in a town called Brønnøysund, where we have 3 active farms. We've been growing salmon for over 10 years, and as we like to say, over 35,000 tons of experience growing salmon. The question always is, why farm salmon? And it's a great look at how we get a grow protein on the planet. It's one of the most resource efficient animal proteins in the world. When you look at in terms of how much feed to create protein, salmon is one of the best compared to chicken or hog or cattle. And you can see on the slide here, in terms of edible meat per 100 kilograms of feed, for every 100 kilograms of feed, you can grow 61 kilograms of salmon, and compared to the other animals, obviously is very, very efficient at converting. And there's a few good reasons for that. I mean, one is they're cold-blooded, and the other is they don't fight gravity. So excellent animal to farm in terms of footprint on the planet. And when you look at the use of fresh water, again, on the same sliding scale, it is one of the most efficient. And the big one is the carbon footprint. Growing salmon is the lowest compared to all other proteins that are farmed. And at Aquaculture, we're really striving to even be lower than the typical, salmon producer. And that's why we're using the technology that we're using today. We look at, aquaculture, and I think it's worth mentioning that when we look at how we have evolved as a human species and our footprint on the planet, it used to be years ago, we were hunter-gatherers on land. And of course, we've evolved on land to become more farmers and look at more sustainable methods of farming. But still in the ocean, we have a lot of opportunity there, because we look at, in terms of the planet, it's 70% of the planet, but right now only 3% of the food we consume comes from aquaculture. And so Aquaculture really worked at a different type of technology that we can use to then farm salmon in the ocean. And what it is it's closed containment systems. And what we see is a great benefit, and this is a floating closed containment system in the ocean where we have our closed barriers that separate farm salmon from things like sea lice and wild salmon. And what our technology, how it's different from typical farming, is that we can capture solids and separate and filter them out, and use that is in terms of what we like to sort of coin as the regenerative aquaculture. So it allows us to use that product in downstream markets as well. Of course, there's a use for capturing and using in biofuels, as well as also taking that product and using it for fertilizers in farming. And of course, in the system, because we control the environment for our salmon, it produces very healthy, high quality, and we get excellent growth from this as well. The biggest benefits is no lice and zero bycatch. So a very different system than what's typically used in aquaculture today. When we talk about some of the downstream products, is that obviously closed containment means we're filtering everything, but we do then release the effluent into the marine environment, because no system is truly 100% closed, even land-based aquaculture. But because it's high in nutrient, we've worked with the veterinarian institution and done things with multi-trophic farming, where we were able to, as you can see in the pictures, grow kelp on the farm lease as well as mussels. And we actually measured an 80% better growth rate on those species as well. And of course, the part that we're filtering out is the sludge that's captured from the farm. We're able to turn those into other products as well. And you can see what it looks like. We actually have the dryers on the farm itself. It turns it into a golden powder, which is then used in Norway. We use it to help power the buses in downtown Bergen as in terms of biofuels, as well as using it as a pellet, which we can actually even create electricity energy back on to help to run the farm. So many opportunities. How do we compare to other farmers? When we look at the published data that comes out of Norway in the last few years, we see our survival is one of the highest using this type of technology, because we're able to reduce a lot of the risks that traditional aquaculture is facing today because of things like climate change. By doing that and having higher survival and consistent feed days, we see better growth than the average of the industry. And our superior quality, which is how fish are graded at a harvesting plant, we see exceptional quality, 96% on all fish harvested today. So compared to open net farming, it helps this type of results, helps pay for the technology, obviously, as it's can be more costly to run in traditional farming. When we look at some of the challenges in open net farming, you can see, why do we need to innovate? Why do we need different technology? And the industry today is challenged by that changing environment in terms of sea lice management and the typical solutions that they have to do to mitigate for that. This is a report now from the industry in Norway, and what it shows you is it's the impact to having to do treatments on on-farm salmon. And you can see this is the downgrade in the superior quality at the harvesting plant. And each year this is increasing and becoming more of a challenge to farmers, because when you have to handle fish, take them out of the water to do a treatment for sea lice, that has an impact on an animal. And our technology, we're able to offset that again, because we have zero sea lice on all of our production. But already from 2018, the better results are they're lower than the worst of the results from 2024. And this downgrade report, you can see year over year is starting to increase, becoming a challenge. So like any industry or any farmer, we start to look at what are some other solutions and turn to an engineering solution that can help to change that into a better result. When we look at that in terms of cost on open net farming now, and you can see that's another driver, is the innovation for new technology, is that increasing year over year. In fact, now most salmon you buy from a traditional open net is about $1.40 higher just on the cost of treatment alone. So there we can take that financial capital and put it into different types of technology like aquaculture in the closed containment, and that allows us to offset and then have higher quality and better results for growth. And so here we are in BC, and we're looking to set up farms here in Canada now, and having great discussions with different First Nations, and obviously to be part of a transition plan that can bring a different approach to farming salmon in BC waters.
Perfect. Thank you, Dean. It was almost perfectly on the 10 minutes that we talked about. So appreciate you keeping the time on that one. It gives an opportunity for Jamie and Isaiah as well. So thank you, Dean. And we'll come back to you. I've got some questions later on in the session.
Great.
Next up, Jamie Gaskell is the CEO at Poseidon Ocean Systems. He is the founder of International Aquaculture Consulting and a former executive with the Maui Group. He is a hands-on career salmon and fish farmer with 30 years of experience across the entire salmon farming value chain, including feed, breeding and genetics, smolt production, RAS, which you'll have to explain to me later, Jamie, what RAS means, sea farming, enclosed sea systems, open ocean farming, harvesting and processing. 18 of those years were as a director with the world's largest salmon farming company in leadership and management role, including managing director and freshwater and seawater production director. I'm going to keep going. Operating in challenging and geographical, environmental, biological and social political conditions in BC, Atlantic Canada, Norway and the US. Jamie has been responsible for salmon farming business units ranging from 18,000 tonnes to 50,000 tonnes annually, building and operating over 100 sea farms, 15 hatchery smolt facilities, 6 broodstock sites, and has had the responsibility for building and operating 8 state-of-the-art RAS smolt post-smolt facilities. His extensive experience is supplemented by an MBA in Sustainable Innovation in Global Seafood from the Norwegian School of Economics, a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from the University of New Brunswick, and Executive Development from the University of BC Sauder School of Business. And pretty impressive bio there, Jamie. So you're the perfect person to have this discussion, and we look forward to hearing from you more about Poseidon. I think you may be on mute there too, Jamie.
Okay, great, Jason. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me here. Is this sharing now?
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
Yeah. So what I thought I'd do is I'd take you through a bit about Poseidon and Poseidon's evolution, show you a bit of the technology that we developed, and also talk a bit about the impact from that technology. Poseidon is really a company trying to focus on clean tech. And clean tech, and as far as the life support platform goes for ocean salmon farming. And I'll explain in a minute what that means in some detail. But just to give you an overview of Poseidon. Poseidon is a BC company from Campbell River, founded here by Matt and Heather Clark 7 or 8 years ago. They really started into the industry focused on moorings, on cages, on supplying those things to the industry. And they became more and more called for supplying life support systems. And what I mean by that is supplying aeration, compressors, oxygenation. And they did that by really selling off-the-shelf equipment that is built by others. And that equipment really wasn't designed for aquaculture specifically. It was designed for other uses, whether it be construction, hospitals, but not aquaculture specific equipment. So it was a big drive from the farmers themselves to make sure that the equipment was designed specifically for them, that it was durable, that it used low energy. So they started to do that, develop their own compressors, their own oxygen generators, their own way to diffuse oxygen into the water. And now the company's really become this advanced aquaculture technology development company. About 40 employees, offices both here in Campbell River and in Chile, and currently exporting to about 8 countries. the focus is really on fish welfare, sustainability, productivity, and climate resilience. And what I mean by that is that, you know, there's a lot of companies in the world right now looking for silver bullet technology to improve the climate. But there are also companies that need to be focused on just resilience for what the climate happens to be dishing out, and Poseidon is one of those. I'll tell you a little bit about our technology. There are, you know, four main products at this point in the company's life cycle. The Trident hybrid cage system, which really allows farmers to operate in some environments that they otherwise would not be able to. Flow Presser, which is a specifically designed compressor for the use of aeration to improve water quality, along with Oxypressor and Depth Charge. This is just an overview of how they look together, but I'll get to what they actually do. We tend to use these in combination: Flow Presser, Oxypressor, and Depth Charge. So we're generating air to move water, we're generating oxygen to enhance the oxygen level, and we're using Depth Charge to fuse that oxygen in an efficient way. And then we integrate that into a cage system, which allows all the supply lines to be integrated to the farm seamlessly. So this is integration that hadn't really existed in the industry until now. But one of the major things it does is that we like to say it turns digitization into action. So what does that mean? Well, in the salmon farming industry right now, there are currently a lot of companies in the area of digitization, of data collection, of sensor technology, using machine learning, using AI to predict what the environment's going to do, to predict what kind of condition the fish might be in, the fish health status. So there's a lot of technology out there to basically tell you what is wrong, but there's not much of an operational arm to actually do anything about it and affect the environment, actually tip the balance in favor of the fish. And this is what this life support platform does. What's so unique about this equipment, besides the fact that it's just designed for the aquaculture industry specifically, is that it really is based on running on low pressure. And that low pressure creates a situation where it's very energy efficient, where you have massive fuel savings compared to what else is out there in the industry, which both saves cost, but it saves carbon footprint as well. These all work in concert together. You're able to dial up the amount of air and the amount of oxygen you need based on the size of fish that you have. So it limits waste, and it makes sure that the oxygen is fully absorbed in the water. So how does this look more practically? And we love to show this slide, and I'll cover it in two parts. If you look at the photograph on the right, this is a salmon farm in the ocean that has recently had a huge mudslide in the area. So the mudslide filled the entire inlet. Had life support system and aeration not being turned on at this farm, you could have ended up with a situation where you've got fish that basically end up being smothered from mud clogging in the gills. So why do we show this image? Well, we show this image to demonstrate that we can use this aeration and oxygenation technology to clear that water, to upwell cleaner water, to create positive pressure. And this photograph is like the ultimate dye test, because the color of that water, that could have easily been harmful algae or jellyfish or a section of water that was just simply too warm for the fish. So it's a great visual impact. The other part of the diagram shows a cross-section of a cage beneath the water with simple barrier technology in place. And what that is tarping material, which really blocks the flow of the ocean through the net, the surface layers. Because Mother Nature brings us a lot of what we need in salmon farming, which is current to exercise the fish, oxygen, but also what comes with Mother Nature often is things that you may not want, whether it be sea lice larvae, harmful jellyfish, toxic algae temperature that's too high. So when you are blocking or screening this out, you need to recreate that environment. You need to use air for the turnover to get clean water, for oxygen to enhance the oxygen levels. And what we see is that we end up with this a situation where we've got improved survival, improved growth, little to no sea lice. In the trial that we're doing right now, fish have been in the water for 15 months in BC and have had no sea lice treatment. So that's a huge win. So this increase in survival and increase in growth, you get an increased yield per fish, which really helps the farmer from a productivity standpoint. How this looks in other places in the world, these are some images of our barges in Chile. So we assemble all the life support in a designated barge. So everything you need for oxygenation, everything you need for aeration. These are plug and play. They can be towed around between farms, and they can be set up to help mitigate these effects. The challenge, of course, in different countries are different, but a lot is the same, the usual suspects that you have to deal with through environmental mitigation. So we end up with this multiple impacts. We're able to supply some climate mitigation, so improve results for the farmer, sustainability based on less fuel and less CO2, and less sea lice treatments as well. All done in the name to improve fish welfare and really help ensure blue food security, is what I would say.
Thanks, Jamie. It's a wonderful story. I got a chance to meet with the team up there just before Christmas, and the facility up in Campbell River is fantastic. Even though I know you're looking for bigger space because you're sort of blowing out of your current space. So it's a great story, and thank you for sharing a bit of that. Next up, Isaiah Robinson. Isaiah is the Deputy Chief Counsellor of the Kitasoo-Hay-Haste Nation and the General Manager of the Kitasoo Development Corporation. He plays a crucial role in supporting and advancing the work initiated by both elected leaders and the Development Corporation's leadership. Since his return to his homeland in 2016, Isaiah has been instrumental in managing the Housing and Public Works Department before transitioning to his current role. His dedication to his community's economic foundation is evident as he pursues further education through an MBA at Simon Fraser University. Isaiah's tenure has been marked by a commitment to continuing the economic successes of his predecessors, contributing to an impressive 99% employment rate in his community. This achievement is in part due to the strategic partnerships in aquaculture and forestry that have been nurtured over nearly 3 decades. These industries have not only become economic staples for the Kitasoo-Hay-Haste Nation, but have also laid a solid foundation for its ongoing prosperity. Thank you, Isaiah, for coming, and look forward to your discussion.
Thanks, Jason. What is the I'm struggling. Give me a second. The bar is hiding my play button. Oh, there we go. So when I was asked to pull together a presentation for this webinar, I asked some of my colleagues in regards to how we've been working on transition for the last 2 years, and so it's been really beneficial to sit down with our partners, Mowi Canada West, and see what Mowi in general is currently working on across the world in regards to R&D. And so we had a bit of fun to pull something together. This is just a mere couple slides. It doesn't really do justice to the amount of work we're doing, I think, and what our partners are currently working on too. But we'll just jump into the overall goal, and that's obviously to have healthy fish and overall a healthy territory when it comes to Indigenous communities on the coast of British Columbia. And so, the overall, one of the main things we're really looking at is obviously, like I said, healthy fish, and it works in regards to freshwater treatments, and obviously one of the main things, and the last things is medical treatment, but non-medical treatment is of course is most paramount. And when it comes down to the need of the overall protection of local species and stuff like that too. The overall management of that is really quite critical when it comes to local First Nations too. And obviously, like I said earlier, the overall well-being and health and wellness of these fish is most critical, because those fish, if they're unwell, also that causes issues within the overall environment too. So looking at how we can handle fish well in all regards throughout their phases of their time within the territory. So, like I said, we've been working on transition for nearly 2 years now, to some extent, and this is, like I said, just a small piece of this, and it's based around the Kitasoo territory, which is 700 kilometers north of Vancouver. We are the most remote community on this that it deals with aquaculture in British Columbia, and we've also been pioneering it for the last 30 years too, like Jason has referenced. So this is a next phase and the next era for this industry within our territory, and we only can really see up at this point with the industry. So like previous panelists have brought up in regards to I don't know. The next slide, I'll bring up the barriers, but primarily one of the big things we're talking about, and of course, lice is something that is constantly being brought up in media and the opposition, I would say, in regards to how we're able to mitigate and ensure that these fish that are within the territories or within these waters are being managed effectively. So there's a couple options that we've looked at, and one of the main ones that is quite interesting is the overall benefit of feeding these fish in a much different way than you typically feed fish on surface level. But the goal will be is to install and position lights within the overall pens, and then we'd be able to adjust the lights, and then I'll adjust the also feed too. So the fish would be able to be fed at a lower and deeper water, where the brackish water compared to where the actual belt of lice is typically, which is probably like it shows on the slide, a couple meters at that point. So the overall goal would be to feed the fish lower, and that would obviously benefit, and the sea lice wouldn't be able to interact directly with the fish during the times of feeding. Obviously, this is also a very beneficial way as the fish can go up and down within these belts of water. And it also encourages a way to delouse the actual fish, because the sea lice can only are generally at a certain level within the water temperatures and stuff like that too. And just like I referenced in the previous slide, this is a slide which can really pair with the previous slide I just showed in regards to the deep sea feeding, but this feeds into that also, and it's the overall skirting. When it comes down to the skirting, we're able to manage the sea lice even more so. So it's a layer upon layer effect is what we're really trying to go for, to ensure that there is that non-interaction of sea lice, but also the mitigation and the overall goal of the transition plan, which is to reduce the overall interaction between the wild stock and Atlantic salmon, right? And so this overall option is currently being researched and development, specifically in Quatsino First Nations, and the site is known as Monday Rocks. So this is currently an option in several sea sites, but this would obviously be one of the simpler ways when it comes to the current technology and innovation that certain nations are looking at and stuff like that. One of the other items that we're looking at and is very prominent and like previous panelists have brought up is AI, and the overall benefit of AI is the amount of data that it's collecting. It builds profiles off of these fish, but is also able to manage and see and the overall issues of health and also sea lice too. So there's stuff like ROVs that are currently in development right now that will be able to manage these sea lice issues, and also the amount of data that it's able to provide more is able to help the overall fish in the long term, and to build a good way to ensure that there's good fish health. And one of the other things, just to build on that, is the overall stingray system that is very much an interesting option, obviously, with lasers and AI and so on. And this type of opportunity obviously would be very much beneficial to manage sea lice in a more effective and swift way compared to when it comes to large scale freshwater or Paramo 50 or sliced and so on. So this option obviously feeds into the previous slide when it comes to the overall monitoring of the fish health, and it's very much beneficial in that sense that it's not as invasive or the fish aren't being as handled, because obviously the more handling of fish you have, the it is not beneficial in the long term for their overall health. And like I said, I represent obviously sometimes the coalition, but when it comes to the broader scale, and when it comes to specifically the nations, our goal when it comes to transition, and this provides clarity for industry and also government, is our goal is to co-govern this industry with the government of Canada and the province, and to have a complete oversight to ensure that things are being managed effectively, but not just the government's way, but what industry or what First Nations expect in the end. And one of the main things when it comes to these innovation and so on is, the big thing that always brought up is the wild stock. So, one of the things we're constantly pushing for is research and development of the overall wild salmon and how we're able to better support that overall declining stock. And one of the big things that's always very controversial within industry and within just the general public and within NGOs and government is science. And the overall goal for us is to develop and set a precedence of an independent center of excellence. So some sort of blue ribbon panel that is able to review the data, that's able to review these innovation opportunities that are hopefully the data that is able to be provided them show the success. And so that's one of the main things that, we really are scientifically based on all our decisions. And so, we're really driven to ensure that we're fostering, growth and overall innovation across the board within technology and within the industry itself. So back to you, Jason.
Thanks, Isaiah. That's fantastic. I love some of the different types of technologies too, with the fish lasers and the AI being used as well. We might get into that later on in the session if we have time. Thank you, Jamie, Dean, and Isaiah. I'd ask you all to put your cameras and microphones on now, and we can start the fun part of the panel, which is when I get to ask questions. I also encourage our audience to do that as well, and by using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We might as well try and get as much information out of our three panelists as we can in the time we have. I'm going to start with a couple of questions. Jamie, I'm going to start with you. You talked about, and I think it's fantastic that Poseidon is selling. I think you mentioned 8 countries around the world. You brought up the example of Chile. You also mentioned that there are some challenges associated with getting technology into different countries. What do you think in terms of getting this new innovation around aquaculture and scaling it out to the world? What are the key challenges that you've faced as at Poseidon and in the future about technologies developed here but then being scaled to world applications or world implementation?
Yeah, I would have to say that the most important thing when it comes to scaling in other countries is to make sure that you have a good producer partnership. That's key. So we've been quite really spoiled that way in British Columbia. We have 3 of the world's top largest salmon farmers here. So collaboration with those farmers locally have been very good over the years. They want to see the technology develop. They want to see technology develop that fits this environment, that fits their challenges. Luckily for us, several regions around the world are faced with the exact same challenges, so it's immediately transferable. But it does take a while to get that in place in those other countries, even though you have great partnerships here. Each country that you move to, you have to make sure that you have a partnership set up in that country, so that you've got this kind of early adopter phase and then kind of first follower phase. So I think that is probably the most key thing. One of the challenges that's actually generated internally, not internally to our company, but within in the country, is that of course we're a growing company. We seek capital to try and grow, and when you've got a situation as it's been within Canada, the BC industry, with the government, on the fence sometimes, or sending mixed messages about the industry, sometimes it doesn't make it so easy to get Canadian investment groups to invest in your company so that you can then develop the technology and export. So I'd say those are the two key things: having a great producer partner in another country, and having some certainty at home so that you can actually continue with your innovation, which you can then export. BC is very unique in a way in the environmental challenges coupled with the farmers, and the rest of the world benefits from having us work on those things and then having that technology applied elsewhere, because the climate change is affecting everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I think it's not only going to be in the aquaculture industry, but some of our other innovative industries as well that might have some of the similar challenges. And I think you mentioned, having that partnership and that collaboration early on is going to be key. Dean, I want to ask you a quick question. You talked early on in your presentation, you talked about the benefits of fish as protein, and how compared to other sorts of protein sources, it's actually a very attractive source. In your mind, and I guess in Aquafutures, with getting these cutting edge aquaculture practices together, I mean, what is that going to do for the global food security issue? I mean, if we're able to successfully achieve this, in your mind, I mean, how big is the goal here?
Well, we need to absolutely keep on with this innovative approach, and farmers are at least one thing you can always rely on them to always be innovative, and in the barns or out on the beachhead, inventing something new and better. But that continues, and I think that focus, like I mentioned in the slides before, where this opportunity in the blue economy and 70% of the planet, we can shift out of being the hunters to take out, wild sources and start looking at farming in those areas, which opens up a huge door for more protein to produce globally. And you see the shift of innovation and different countries becoming more in line with that. And innovation goes all the way down the value chain. It starts with, sustainable feed. You need precision aquaculture. We need to be measuring with probes, taking that information and then feeding it back into innovation. And it's really about the fish rearing systems, taking the risk out of it so we can control that environment that we're raising fish in. So yeah, I think our goal is to work towards a regenerative aquaculture design that can increase food for the planet and the increasing population.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think food security is a problem, and food security, especially with the lens of sustainability and regenerative types of approaches. So I think it does present a good opportunity for that. You did mention there about the wild catch, and I want to segue this over to Isaiah. And you mentioned something about the wild stock and the potential decline that it has been. How do you think, and what's your considerations about how can this sort of aquaculture and the innovation that we're seeing in aquaculture really have a positive impact, I think, on overfishing in marine ecosystems?
Maybe I'll just start off by saying, I've over the last 2 years, I've had the chance to meet with many First Nations leaders on this overall file and this overall transition discussion. And one of the leaders said something to me that struck me very, it intrigued me. And he basically said he'd rather all Canadians eat aquaculture foods than eating our wild stock. And that's Chief Thomas Smith of the Odyssey. So, when it comes down to that perspective, and, we've come from an era of completely overfishing our overall food. And so if we have a chance to grow our overall wild stock and with the support of aquaculture and inadvertently doing that with innovation, I think we're doing ourselves a good thing. And, as an Indigenous person, we always look 7 generations. It's not just for us now, it's for the future. And I think it's really important that these innovation options we have to help us into the future, that it's all for the betterment. And I think innovation is key for us to move forward. And this is all about aquaculture, but as an Indigenous person, aquaculture is a baby when it comes to economics. Look at forestry, and you hear forestry has not changed. You're always going to chop the tree the same way. Aquaculture, there's a chance to grow, and there's a chance to change. And I think that's how we really have to look at this in the end.
Okay. I'm going to pause here for a second. I've got a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to start with just a general one to all the panelists, and I don't know exactly who to direct this to because I don't know who had the best answer on this one. But maybe the question is regarding what are these sorts of technologies and innovation. I mean, we're very much focused on salmon and talking about salmon. I guess that's because of the region. But what do these impacts have on other species of potential fish, but also on shellfish, etc. So I'll open it up to anyone here, and maybe if anyone wants to jump in and say, you know, that this technology can support that, or is there a good direction towards it?
I could start. I would say that a lot of this technology, if not all of this technology, is equally applicable to almost all finfish species. I mean, whether you're going to decide to grow steelhead, or you're going to grow black cod, or you're going to grow something else, there are changes, of course, that are species specific. But it's the great thing about this technology. It's applicable to a lot of species, so it'll continue to have kind of outsized positive effect, not only on salmon farming, but other species, both, you know, within Canada and abroad, that people decide to grow or expand upon.
And I can add to that too, and I think it's important to keep looking down that value chain, and we are working closely now with the veterinary institution in Norway. So when we recapture, filter, and use the effluent water, we can see that 80% better growth on kelp and mussels, and that's just a start to learn more about that, so that we can do multi-trophic farming. So in one lease area, you're able to produce multiple different types of food.
And I would say, you know, the coastal First Nations, there's been a large scale partnership in regards to certain shellfish opportunities. And so, yeah, obviously we have a different perspective in the sense of, yes, industry is able to do it. There's large dollars that are able to support you. But when it comes to First Nations communities, it's quite hard to pull capital together. It's quite hard to pull these overall opportunities together. But the world's our oyster. It's just how we have to attack it, I think, in the end. And it's um, the return on salmon obviously is a much more paramount, and we have large partners that are able to make it much more feasible. And I think when it comes to the longer term lives of shellfish, that is required to make it a good turnaround in ROI.
Okay. Another question, and this one's more directed towards yourself, Isaiah, and it follows on from, I guess, a little bit what you were saying there about, you know, with your transition plan that you presented, and it's fantastic the direction the nation's taking. What do governments need to do to support you and the nation on that transition plan? And then secondly to that, without getting into too much, I mean, how does that then translate to helping other nations follow a similar sort of path?
Ooh, that's very much a deep question. I think when it comes down to the current transition discussion, this is a big discussion in regards to UNDRIP and reconciliation. It's a big discussion on how the government's able to fit everything into a box, but we're not all the same size box, and we're all different in regards to nations' perspectives, and we all have the different priorities. You know, Kitasu's goal is not to make lots and lots of money off of our aquaculture partners. Our goal is to have a 99% employment rate. Our goal is to have as much jobs as possible. And I think it's a very diverse perspective. And, you know, when it comes down to innovation, we're able to get ROI much faster for our partners. And, I think that helps us too, because we make some money off the overall operation too. So, economic prosperity is obviously a goal, but when it comes to First Nations, we're all the same. And we all have different perspectives and expectations of our partners, and also the government and how they work together with us.
Okay. I'm going to turn it on with another quick question that sort of links into one of the questions I was pushing towards, which was, there's a lot that goes into these aquaculture farms. There's a lot of, I think, Jamie, you mentioned, there's moorings, there's energy, there's, all sorts of different requirements. What are some of the key barriers to really driving the innovation and getting aquaculture going? And one of the audience members talks about, is power a big component, and is getting off diesel or removing the reliance of diesel a big the biggest one that we can work on? And is it an opportunity to throw money at, or is it really to be a bit more creative with? So I might start with Jamie. I know the work you're doing a lot is around, some of the compressors and stuff. Are those the key barriers? The power being a big issue? Is there other barriers at the moment? And I guess, what is kind of some of the solutions that we can work towards on that?
Yeah, it depends what you mean in terms of in terms of barriers. You could say, for instance, and I think this was I plan to address this later, that some of the barriers are institutional, like for the fact that Canada doesn't have an Aquaculture Act yet. We're 40 years behind all the other salmon farming jurisdictions who all have an Aquaculture Act. And that Aquaculture Act lets you be kind of a legitimate industry. So that's kind of one. I would say next, when you're talking in terms of government, as Dean has mentioned, the farmers are very innovative, as are the suppliers, and they work together. There is a lot of positive spillover in the business. In other words, one farmer sees something that's really working, their adoption is kind of really quick on that. But what fosters that, or what makes that happen even faster, is that if the government has some regulations or they have some goalposts, the industry needs to know, what are the goalposts? Set them, and then move the heck out of the way once you've set them. And just let the farmers and the suppliers and their partners figure out the innovation. So I think that's more of a block than anything, rather than people trying to be prescriptive on what technology they might use. Now, if you are being prescriptive and you focus on, different levels of technology, and Dean could answer this better than I, there are types of equipment that, yes, they need electricity. And so if you're in a country or a region where you don't have a huge infrastructure for having shore power that could run to some of these facilities, it's challenging relative to other countries. But it doesn't mean it's the last thing. I think the biggest thing is get out of the way, give us the goalposts, let the farmers and their partners and the suppliers figure it out, because that's how 99% of innovation is driven anyway, anywhere.
Okay, so I'm going to throw that to Dean then with a little caveat on that. Is there a chance that we may be focusing attention in the wrong areas, that we're trying to solve problems that we may not need to, where the bigger problems are getting away from us? Is that, I'm thinking about the diesel and using, maybe it's better just to stick with diesel for the time being and focus on the fish health and other areas. Is that a potential risk at the moment?
It's a good question, and I think Jamie touched on it a little, because you're right. What you want to do is you want to look and see, okay, what are the impacts of something you're doing? And if it's something that you decide and work together with government, stakeholders, environmentalists, and say, here's an area we want to improve, well, then you get together and you figure out a way to really measure that well, and then you innovate, and then you measure how well you're improving that KPI. And that, when you talk about energy, it's an important part. If we were to say that our CO2 equivalent is related to what we do in terms of how we raise protein, well, salmon already is the leader in that. So now we can even be better. We'll never stop. I often say I've never grown salmon the same way twice. And farmers innovate so quickly that every generation of fish you grow, you're going to do it a little differently each time. And it is a fast-moving industry. But you want to move in the right direction, like you're alluding to. And I think we live in a world now full of ultra-crepidarians, and those are, the definition of that is people who have opinions, but not necessarily the education to to support those opinions. It's and I think that's important, because a lot of interjection happens. And it starts to push politicians in a way that doesn't necessarily support their own science. A good case point of view is looking at DFO and their current study with the CSAS report. their own science showed that aquaculture has less than minimal impact on the ecosystem and wild salmon, specifically around the Fraser River. But that's a great starting point, and let's continue to get better from there. But if a lot of opinions are driving people away from that science, then if we don't have science as a good foundation and good measurements, then we're sort of floating, and that could, like you say, cause us to go in an area that is a lot of effort, investment, and costs, and not for the right reasons.
Okay, I'm gonna switch tracks a little bit now, and come to Isaiah. You talked a little bit about the opportunities, and you said aquaculture is similar to forestry in some respects. People are going to take that as saying that's out of context. I want to talk about with innovative sustainable aquaculture and opportunities for sustainable aquaculture. What are the sort of long-term implications, hopefully positive, on communities and economies, especially like your own?
I think when it comes down to it, we're in this era of change, and I think it's very unique. Like I said before, and people may take it out of context, like you've referenced. You're always going to chop a tree down the same way. However, just like Dean has referenced, you're never going to grow fish the same way. And um, I think it's really important to understand that for us to be successful, we have to be very creative. And just like that's what Jamie has mentioned also, we really have to understand that First Nations, we are equal to the government of Canada in regards to their expectation. This industry of Mowi Canada West and Cermaq and Grieg, these large companies that really are at the forefront of agriculture in BC, when it comes to working with First Nations, they're only operating the in First Nations territories, 100% supported right at this point. So, when it comes down to, it's what we expect, and it's what we set the bar to in the end. And what the previous question you just asked about what the barriers are. If you were to ask me 6 months ago what the barriers are, it would be certainty, and it would be certainty for my partner shareholders to understand to make good investments. And as we come up to June 30th of this fiscal, I'm very confident to say we have certainty in regards to a 6-year license renewal, and we have certainty for that there will be investments coming to Canada. And so I think it's a good opportunity for there to be more innovation and more growth, and for Canada to be at the forefront of aquaculture, because we have the longest coastline in the world. I think we have to remember that. So the world's our oyster, and I'll continue to say that as much as of a pun as it is when we talk about aquaculture in general.
So following on from that then, Isaiah, I mean, you mentioned about the barrier being certainty 6 months ago, and hopefully there's some more certainty. So hopefully that barrier is sort of knocked away a bit. The opportunities, are the communities and the regional communities, are they identifying these opportunities as positive? You mentioned about things like applications of AI and different technologies and economic opportunities. Are they being clearly identified?
I would say yes in that regard, but I would also say that it's really up to the nations. Like I said, my expectations are very, very, very broad for industry. That's my expectations. It's not just my expectations. We had a community consultation, so it's what the community dreamed of, and at the forefront of that, it is not aquaculture. It is wild stock science and further development. So. I see a good opportunity for us in the long term when it comes to aquaculture on the coast of British Columbia. But it all depends on what the nations want and what it is feasible in the end.
So we've got a couple of minutes left before we close up. I want to take a thread that you started with, Isaiah, about the opportunity here in BC, and expand that to. I'll start with Dean. And it's a good example for you because you work for a company that's headquartered internationally. Why is BC such an attractive opportunity, and Canada an attractive opportunity for this, given some of the barriers and the challenges we've talked about? Why is this a great location to do this technology development and really help these global issues?
I think if you look at the globe and then the optimal farming area around the planet, we're in a perfect temperature zone for growing salmon. it's just ideal. And we've got this great, glacier fed, cool waters that we can have very healthy salmon and salmon farming. And then a lot of, like Isaiah shared, I mean, you've got these rural coastal communities that have this opportunity to have farming in their territories and create employment and a better economic benefit. We can see in some of our discussions, even with other nations, that there are challenges, and the suicide rates are still quite high. And as I shared earlier, these kinds of opportunities help to turn the economics and the ethics around in those communities. And we're really striving to do that and see that opportunity in BC. The government has announced a transition plan. And, it goes a little bit to what Jamie was saying earlier, if and when this actual transition plan comes out, we're imagining that there's going to be a benchmark of environmental performances that all the companies need to adhere to. And typically with what we hear locally in BC is that it's around sea lice management. So innovating and having a solution that we have had zero sea lice for over a decade, we hope that can be another tool to include in aquaculture in British Columbia, and not replace it, but actually create another mechanism for the growth of this in British Columbia. Because at the end of the day, our coastline is so vast. There is so much more potential and opportunity to grow this industry healthy to help benefit all British Columbians. And on the East Coast. I shouldn't leave out the other side of the country.
Thanks, Dean. Jamie, do you want to just add to that from the perspective of Poseidon being a technology developer that's based here, that's developing its technology and is exporting it to the world?
Yeah, sure. I think we touched on that a bit, but I think to follow up what Dean and Isaiah had to say about the potential of BC, there's some stats you need to put in your mind. If you look at the coastline of Norway and the coastline of BC as the crow flies, it's about 2,500 kilometers in length, but it's about 25,000 kilometers in available coastline, all the coves, all the islands, everything, both places. Norway sustainably grows 1.4 million metric tons in that space, and we grow about 80,000 tons. So it's like the industry hasn't happened yet in reality. So to look at it a different way, we harvest about, and someone out there is going to check my math, I'm sure, and come back to me. We harvest about 2 tons per square kilometer available farming area. 2. All the Norwegian regions are between 5 and 40 tons per square kilometer space, and Chile in almost every region is greater than 40. So it's a huge amount of potential. All First Nation territory, of course, and the benefit is those nations have a better understanding of their territory than anybody, especially where things should be sited and how they want them managed. It's a real benefit. There's not another country that has that. From Poseidon's point of view, again, back to the first part, we've got great partners in BC. We have environmental challenges coming with climate change that we need to face for those fish and our farmers, and that is perfect R&D area in BC to meet those challenges because they're so common elsewhere in the world. It's easily exportable to solve the same issues for others. So we really couldn't pick a better spot.
Perfect. On that note, guys, we've run out of time. We could talk for hours on this, I'm sure, and we've lots more opportunities. I look forward to chatting with you all. Thank you to our speakers, Dean, Jamie, and Isaiah. Thank you for giving your time. I know it's valuable, so I appreciate it. For our listeners and our viewers, don't forget to visit our Coast website where you can see this and all more webinars on different technologies. Just finally, on a couple of points, Coast is currently undertaking an ecosystem survey where we're trying to encourage or find out more about what the challenges and barriers are for new technology developers and innovators to really succeed in British Columbia. We're looking for information on that. Please use the QR code on the screen or visit our website. That will be open until middle of April. And finally, we are hosting a social event networking mixer in Campbell River on March 26th. It's our first event in Campbell River. We're looking forward to that. It's at the Anchor Inn starting at about 5 o'clock. Please visit the website and register there. We'd love to see you there. Thank you all, and thanks again for everyone's time.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.